The Reliance command deck erupted into chaos as the Kobali boarding pods sliced through the hull, disgorging heavily armed alien marines. Within minutes, the lizard-like warriors had subdued most of the human crew, aiming plasma rifles at the captives' heads to cow them into submission. Only Captain Jones avoided capture, slipping away amidst the pandemonium, hell-bent on retaking his ship. It was supposed to be a routine survey mission in the disputed Galax sector, a vast expanse of resource-rich systems along the border between United Earth Federation space and the Kobali Empire. For months, tensions had been running high as both sides laid claim to the sector's untapped mineral wealth. Sporadic skirmishes flared as human and Kobali prospectors raced to stake their claims. The UEF maintained that the Galax sector was unclaimed territory under galactic law, open for all species to explore and exploit. But the Kobali saw it as their ancestral domain, refusing to let upstart humans plunder what was rightfully theirs. When the Reliant arrived to conduct a geological survey of potential mining sites, the Kobali warship Ngarek was waiting in ambush, hidden behind the system's third moon. Before Captain Jones could even open hailing frequencies, the Kobali struck. A salvo of ion torpedoes slammed into the Reliance engines, ionizing the magnetic containment coils and leaving the ship dead in space. Then the boarding pods were away, latching onto the crippled vessel like hungry ticks. Outnumbered and outgunned, the Reliance security teams fought bravely, but were swiftly overrun. Their weapons had little effect against the Kobali's thickly armored pressure suits. In minutes, the aliens had seized the bridge, engineering, and life support. Only the armory remained in human hands. Captain Jones crept through darkened maintenance corridors, a cold rage building in his chest. The Kobali had made a fatal mistake in leaving him free. He was going to make them pay for daring to attack a human ship. Reaching the armory, Jones armed himself with a plasma carbine and bandolier of concussion grenades. Then he went hunting. One by one, Jones stalked the Kobali boarding parties, using the ship's air vents and maintenance tubes to infiltrate their positions. He struck from the shadows, a plasma bolt to the head, a grenade tossed into a clustered squad. Whenever the aliens massed against him, Jones faded away, only to attack again from an unexpected angle. Fear and confusion spread through the Kobali ranks as their numbers dwindled. Soon, alien bodies littered the Reliance corridors. Panicked survivors fell back to their pods, only to find Jones waiting for them, plasma rifle primed. "You should never have fucked with my ship," Jones growled as he cut them down. Beaten and bloodied, the Kobali fled back to the Ngarek. As the warship withdrew, its commander, Warlord Jackson, appeared on the Reliance view screen, yellow eyes blazing with hatred. "This is not over, human!" Jackson snarled, barbed tongue flicking between needle teeth. "You have violated the sovereign territory of the Kobali Empire. There will be consequences. Any further incursions will be met with the full force of the Kobali Stellar Navy." The transmission cut out, leaving Jones alone on his bridge, the taste of victory turning to ashes in his mouth. He had repelled the boarding action and saved his crew, but at what cost? The Kobali would surely retaliate for this humiliation. A single misstep could plunge the galaxy into a devastating war that would cost billions of lives. His thoughts were interrupted by an incoming message from UEF Fleet Command. Admiral Hawkins appeared on the view screen, her normally stern features etched with worry. "Captain Jones, I've received your report on the incident with the Kobali. This is a crisis. The Kobali are mobilizing their war fleets along the border and demanding we withdraw from the Galax sector immediately. The President has authorized me to open diplomatic talks to resolve this without bloodshed. I'm placing the Reliant under the command of Ambassador Hoshi to serve as his escort and negotiate a settlement." Jones stiffened. The notion of groveling before the treacherous Kobali galled him. After what they had done, diplomacy was futile. This situation called for strength. "With all due respect, Admiral, the Kobali only understand one thing: force. If we let them push us around, it will only encourage their aggression. We need to hit them hard and fast. Make them think twice about messing with us again." Hawkins shook her head. That is not your call, Captain. We're trying to prevent a war, not start one. You have your orders. Escort the ambassador and keep him safe. Do not do anything to provoke the Kobali further. Is that clear? Jones kept his face expressionless. Yes, Admiral. As the screen went dark, Jones stalked over to the tactical console. He did not trust the Kobali. They had already shown their true colors. You couldn't negotiate with a race that attacked without warning and took prisoners. No, the only way to keep the Kobali in line was to bloody their nose and make them fear human retribution. As the Reliant set course for the Kobali frontier, ostensibly to begin peace talks, Jones was already analyzing the enemy's defenses, searching for weak points that a UEF first strike could hammer. He would play along with this diplomatic charade. For now, let the politicians and diplomats dither and debate while he gathered intel. And when the shooting started, as it inevitably would, Jones would be ready. He had seen the carnage the Kobali inflicted firsthand. His ship, his crew. Never again. Never. The Kobali had been warned. They fucked around. Now it was time to show them what it meant to provoke the full might of the human race. When the time came, Jones would lead the charge to drive the alien menace back to the stinking jungles that spawned them, for the safety of Earth and all humanity. Jones's jaw tightened as he gripped the command chair's armrests. It was time to teach the Kobali Empire what happened when you fucked with a human ship. The Reliant veered off its charted course, thrusters pulsing as it maneuvered through a dense asteroid field. Captain Jones stood on the bridge, eyes fixed on the screen. Steady as she goes, helm, nice and easy. The ship threaded between massive chunks of space rock. Jones checked his chrono. Right on time. A battered freighter materialized from behind a large asteroid. Jones nodded to his communications officer. Hail them. A gruff voice crackled over the comm. This is Riker. You're late, Jones. Traffic was hell. You got the goods? As promised, docking now. The freighter latched onto the Reliance airlock. Jones strode to meet his visitor, footsteps echoing through empty corridors. The crew thought this was a standard resupply. They had no idea what was really going on. Riker emerged from the airlock, a stocky man with a cybernetic eye. He carried a large case. Your new toys, Captain. Latest human tech, fresh off the black market. Should give those lizards a nasty surprise. Jones took the case, popping it open to reveal sleek energy weapons. What about the intel? Riker handed over a data chip. Schematics of Kobali defense grids, patrol routes, the works. Wasn't easy to get. I'm sure it wasn't cheap either. Riker grinned. Worth every credit when you're kicking Kobali ass. After Riker departed, Jones gathered his senior staff in the ready room. He laid out the weapons and activated a holo display of Kobali defenses. Gentlemen, it's time you knew the truth. We're not on a diplomatic mission. We're going to hit the Kobali hard and fast before they can regroup from our last encounter. Hawkins leaned forward. About damn time, sir. Those bastards need to be taught a lesson. Zhang nodded in agreement. Their defenses look formidable, but with this intel we can find a weak point. Riggs frowned. Captain, this is madness. We can't just attack unprovoked. What about the peace talks? Jones smacked his palm on the table. Wake up, Riggs. The Kobali can't be reasoned with. It's us or them. But, sir, this will start a war. The war's already started. We're just making the first move. A klaxon blared, cutting off further debate. Jones rushed to the bridge. Report! Sir, we're picking up a distress call, the COMEM's officer said. Human freighter under attack by Kobali raiders. Jones's eyes narrowed. Perfect. Red alert. Set an intercept course. Maximum warp. Riggs protested. Captain, we can't engage the Kobali now. It could derail everything. We're not abandoning our people, Riggs. All hands battle stations. The Reliant streaked through space, weapons charging. They entered a swirling nebula, sensors struggling to penetrate the cosmic clouds. Suddenly, Kobali warships materialized all around them, weapons blazing. The bridge rocked under heavy fire. It's a trap, Jones snarled. Evasive maneuvers. But it was too late. Outnumbered and outgunned, The Reliant took hit after hit. Consoles exploded in showers of sparks. The hull buckled under the barrage. "Shield's critical. We can't take much more of this," Riggs shouted over the din. Jones gripped his chair, nucleus tightening. He'd walked right into their ambush. There was only one option left. "All stop. Power down weapons." The words tasted like ash in his mouth. "Open a channel." Commander Jackson's reptilian face filled the view screen, yellow eyes gleaming with triumph. "Ah, Captain Jones, such a pleasure to see you again. And how goes your diplomatic mission?" Jones glared. "Cut the crap, Jackson. You've made your point." "Oh, I'm just getting started. Your ship and crew are now property of the Kobali Empire, and you, dear Captain, will answer for your crimes against our people." Kobali boarding parties swarmed the Reliant. Jones and his officers were dragged to the brig of Jackson's flagship. As the cell door slammed shut, Jones slumped against the wall. He'd tried to outsmart the Kobali to protect humanity. Instead, he'd given them exactly what they wanted, an excuse for war. Jones buried his face in his hands. What the hell had he done? Jones paced the cramped cell, his mind racing. The Kobali guards outside stood motionless, their scaly skin glistening under the harsh lights. He knew he had to act fast. Earth's fate hung in the balance. "Now," he whispered to himself. Jones collapsed to the floor, clutching his stomach and writhing in apparent agony. "Help! Something's wrong!" he shouted. The guards rushed in, weapons raised. As they neared, Jones sprang into action. He swept the legs out from under the first guard, sending him crashing to the ground. In one fluid motion, Jones grabbed the fallen guard's weapon and fired at the second, dropping him with a well-placed shot. Alarms blared as Jones sprinted down the corridor, freeing his crew along the way. "Hawkins, Zhang, with me to the bridge. Riggs, secure the engine room. Move." They fought their way through the ship, stunning Kobali left and right. Jones led the charge to the armory, arming his crew with captured weapons. "We take the ship fast and hard. No hesitation." On the bridge, Commander Jackson spun around as the doors hissed open. Jones stood in the entryway, plasma rifle leveled at the Kobali leader's head. "It's over, Jackson. Stand down." Jackson's forked tongue flicked out in anger. "You fool. You've doomed your entire species." "Zhang, hack their comms. Broadcast to the fleet," Jones ordered. He turned back to Jackson. "Your invasion ends here. Call off your ships or I put a bolt through your head." Zhang's fingers flew over the alien console. "Broadcasting now, sir." Jones addressed the Kobali Armada. "This is Captain Gabriel Jones. We've captured your flagship and your commander. Any further aggression against humanity will result in Jackson's immediate execution. Stand down and withdraw." Tense moments passed as Jones waited for a response. Finally, the comm crackled to life. "This is Vice Admiral Kavex. We accept your terms. Allow our ships to retrieve Commander Jackson, and we will withdraw." Jones nodded grimly. "Agreed. But know this. If you ever threaten Earth again, we won't show mercy next time." As the Reliant sped away from Kobali space, Jones opened a channel to Earth. Admiral Hawkins's stern face appeared on screen. "Captain, what the hell is going on out there?" "Sir, the Kobali were planning a full-scale invasion of Earth. We've managed to stop them for now, but we need to prepare. They'll be back, and in greater numbers." Hawkins' eyes widened. "Dear God, I'll mobilize the fleet immediately. Get back here ASAP for a full debrief." Jones turned to address his weary crew. "I know I've put you all through hell. My actions nearly started a war, but now we may be the only thing standing between Earth and annihilation. We can't wait for them to strike first. We need to take the fight to the Kobali." Murmurs of agreement spread through the bridge. Hawkins spoke up. "What are you proposing, Captain?" "A preemptive strike, Admiral. Hit them hard before they can regroup. It's our only chance." Hawkins nodded gravely. "Agreed. I'm dispatching our strongest battle group to rendezvous with you. You'll lead the assault, Captain. Godspeed." As the Reliant raced to meet its reinforcements, Jones studied tactical displays of the Kobali fleet. They were vastly outnumbered, but he knew humanity's survival depended on their success. "All hands prepare for battle," Jones announced over the ship-wide comm. "We strike in 6 hours. May God have mercy on us all." The Reliant shuddered as another volley of Kobali fire slammed into its shields. Captain Jones gripped the arms of his command chair, his eyebrows furrowed. "Status report!" "Shields at 30%. Multiple hull breaches on decks 3 through 7. Lieutenant Zhang called out, her fingers flying over the flickering tactical display. Jones nodded grimly. "Hawkins, prep the assault team. We're boarding that flagship." Minutes later, Jones led a strike force through the airlock, mag boots clanking against the Kobali hull. They cut through with plasma torches, emerging into dim red emergency lighting. The corridor ahead bristled with Kobali defenders. "Go, go, go," Jones shouted, diving for cover as energy bolts sizzled past. His team returned fire, filling the air with the smell of ozone and burned flesh. They pushed forward relentlessly, Jones in the lead. Floor by floor they fought, leaving a trail of stunned and bleeding Kobali in their wake. Jones took a glancing hit to his shoulder, but barely slowed. Finally, they reached the bridge. The doors hissed open. Commander Jackson stood there, scales gleaming, towering over Jones. "So the little human comes to die," he hissed. Jones tossed aside his weapon. "Just you and me, lizard." Jackson lunged, claws extended. Jones ducked under the swipe and drove his fist into Jackson's midsection. The Kobali wheezed, but caught Jones with a backhand that sent him sprawling. Jones rolled to his feet, tasting blood. He feinted left, then landed a crushing right hook to Jackson's jaw. The alien staggered. Jones pressed his advantage, raining blows on his larger opponent. Jackson's superior strength began to tell. He caught Jones in a bear hug, squeezing the breath from him. Jones slammed his forehead into Jackson's snout. The Kobali's grip loosened. Jones broke free and delivered a final, devastating uppercut. Jackson collapsed. Jones stood over him, chest heaving. He snatched up a fallen weapon and aimed it at the Kobali commander's head. "It's over. Call off your fleet." Human reinforcements swarmed the bridge. Jones tapped his comm. "Reliant, this is Jones. We've taken the flagship. Jackson is our prisoner." But even as Jones savored his victory, events were unfolding beyond his control. On the Kobali homeworld, 3 figures strode into the Imperial Communications Center. "By order of the new ruling triumvirate, cut off all channels to the fleet," Supreme Commander Kraxus growled. Targoth nodded. "Jackson has failed us. Prepare a system-wide broadcast." On screens across Kobali space, Mordak's scarred visage appeared. "Citizens of the Empire, Commander Jackson has been captured by human barbarians. We, your loyal servants, have assumed control to save our people from destruction. All ships are ordered to regroup for a final assault. We will crush these human vermin once and for all." In the brig of his own flagship, Jackson glared at Jones through the force field. "You fool. You've made things worse. The triumvirate will never stop until your world burns." Jones felt the bitter taste of defeat. His bold gambit had backfired spectacularly. All around him, reports streamed in of a massive Kobali fleet assembling. With a heavy heart, Jones opened a channel to the Reliant. "Hawkins, send the order. All ships, retreat. We're going home." As the battered human fleet limped away from the oncoming Kobali armada, Jones stared out at the stars. He'd started this war to save humanity. Now he feared he'd doomed them all. The battered remnants of the human fleet limped into Earth's orbit, their hulls scorched and pitted from Kobali weapons fire. Captain Gabriel Jones stood on the bridge of the Reliant, watching as repair drones swarmed over his damaged ship. "Captain, Admiral Hawkins requests your presence in the war room," Lieutenant Zhang reported. Jones nodded, his face etched with exhaustion. He made his way through the bustling corridors of the orbital shipyard, passing crews working feverishly to patch hull breaches and replace fried systems. In the war room, a holographic display of Kobali space dominated the center. Admiral Hawkins and the United Earth leadership huddled around it, their faces grim. "Captain Jones, report," Hawkins barked. Jones stepped forward. "Sir, the Kobali are in disarray. Our intelligence suggests a power struggle between factions loyal to Jackson and the new triumvirate." Murmurs rippled through the assembled leaders. Jones continued, "If we act now, we can exploit this weakness." A general scoffed. "With what? Half our fleet is in pieces?" "Not with brute force," Jones countered. He tapped a control, zooming in on the Kobali homeworld. "We have an opportunity for a surgical strike. Extract Jackson, destabilize the triumvirate's rule." Heated debate erupted. Jones stood his ground, outlining the daring plan. Finally, Hawkins raised a hand for silence. "It's risky as hell," the Admiral said. "Who would lead such a mission?" Jones squared his shoulders. "I will, sir." Days later, Jones crouched in the cockpit of the experimental stealth frigate, his hand steady on the controls as they slipped past Kobali patrols. Behind him, a team of elite Marines and engineers checked their gear. "Approaching the capital," Riggs reported from the co-pilot's seat. "Planetary defenses ahead." Jones's eyes narrowed. "Engage stealth systems. We're going in hot." The frigate shuddered as it plunged through the atmosphere, skirting detection grids by mere meters. They touched down in a secluded ravine near the sprawling Kobali capital. "Move out," Jones ordered. The team fanned out, their stealth suits blending seamlessly with the alien landscape. They approached the looming prison complex. Jones signaled, and shaped charges blew a hole in the outer wall. Alarms blared as they stormed inside. Kobali guards swarmed from every direction. Jones's team moved with brutal efficiency, their weapons set to stun. They fought their way deeper into the facility, leaving a trail of unconscious aliens in their wake. "Cell block ahead," Riggs called out. Jones blasted the door controls. Inside, Jackson looked up in shock as his cell force field flickered and died. "What is the meaning of this?" the Kobali leader hissed. "No time to explain," Jones said, tossing him a weapon. "You're coming with us." They fought their way back through waves of reinforcements. Jones took point, his rifle spitting plasma bolts that dropped Kobali left and right. Suddenly, a massive figure blocked their path. General Targoth of the Triumvirate towered over them, flanked by elite troops. "Surrender, humans," Targoth growled. "You cannot escape." Jones raised his weapon. "Like hell we can't." The two forces clashed in a fury of gunfire and hand-to-hand combat. Jones found himself face-to-face with Targoth, the Kobali's claws slashing at his armor. Jones ducked under a swipe, driving his fist into Targoth's midsection. The alien wheezed but caught Jones with a backhand that sent him sprawling. Rolling to his feet, Jones feinted left, then landed a crushing right hook to Targoth's jaw. The Kobali staggered. Jones pressed his advantage, raining blows on his larger opponent. Targoth's superior strength began to tell. He caught Jones in a bear hug, squeezing the breath from him. Jones slammed his forehead into Targoth's snout. The Kobali's grip loosened. With a final burst of strength, Jones broke free and delivered a devastating uppercut. Targoth collapsed, green blood oozing from a gash in his scales. "Sir, we've got to move!" Riggs shouted, laying down covering fire. Jones hefted the unconscious Targoth over his shoulder. "Bring him. We need leverage." They fought their way to the landing zone, Kobali forces in hot pursuit. The stealth frigate's engines roared to life as they piled aboard. "Go, go, go!" Jones yelled. The ship rocketed into the sky, weaving through a hail of defensive fire. They breached the atmosphere, streaking away from the Kobali homeworld. In the cargo hold, Jackson glared at Jones. "Why risk everything to free me?" Jones met his gaze. "Because this war ends now, one way or another. You can help us broker peace, or watch both our races burn. Your choice." Jackson's eyes narrowed, considering. Finally, he nodded. "Very well, human. Let us see if your gambit pays off." The stealth frigate vanished into the depths of space, carrying with it the fate of two civilizations. The stealth frigate's engines hummed softly as it glided into the swirling gases of the Vega Nebula. Captain Jones stood at the viewport, watching tendrils of purple and green cosmic dust curl around the ship's hull. "We should be safe here for now," he said, turning to face Jackson. The Kobali leader's scales gleamed in the nebula's ethereal light. Jackson's reptilian eyes narrowed. Safe, perhaps, but for how long? Jones led Jackson to a small conference room. They sat across from each other, the tension palpable. "We need to talk," Jones said, leaning forward, "about an alliance." Jackson hissed softly. "An alliance? With humans? You must be desperate indeed." "We both are," Jones countered. "The triumvirate is our common enemy now." Jackson's claws tapped against the table. "During my confinement, I heard whispers. Many Kobali grow weary of the triumvirate's aggression." Jones nodded. "Then help us stop this war. Together, we might have a chance." "Perhaps," Jackson said, "but first a gesture of trust. Release Targoth to me." Jones's heart made. "He's our only leverage." "He's my proof that you're serious about peace," Jackson retorted. For hours they argued back and forth. Finally, against the protests of his crew, Jones agreed. Targoth was brought to the conference room, his hands bound. Jones deactivated the restraints. "You're free to go with Jackson," he said. Targoth rubbed his wrists, eyeing Jones suspiciously. "What game are you playing, human?" "No game," Jones replied. "Just a chance at ending this war." As Jackson led Targoth away, Lieutenant Zhang burst into the room. "Sir, you can't trust them." Jones sighed. "We don't have a choice." Days passed. Jackson worked tirelessly, sending encrypted messages deep into Kobali space. Soon, ships began to appear on the edge of the nebula. Battered cruisers and civilian transports, each carrying Kobali dissidents fleeing the triumvirate's iron grip. Jones watched from the frigate's bridge as a Kobali warship, its hull scarred from battle, docked with their vessel. The airlock hissed open. A tall, aristocratic Kobali female strode out, flanked by guards. "Greetings, Captain Jones," she said. "I am Counselor Vex. Jackson speaks highly of you." Jones nodded cautiously. "Welcome aboard, Counselor. I hope we can work together." More ships arrived daily. A makeshift fleet grew within the nebula's concealing clouds. Humans and Kobali worked side by side, repairing vessels and sharing intelligence. In a hastily constructed command center, Jackson addressed a group of Kobali leaders. Jones stood to the side, watching. "The triumvirate leads us to ruin," Jackson said, his voice rising. "We must sue for peace before it's too late." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd, but one voice rang out in dissent. "And trust the humans?" a grizzled Kobali warrior shouted. "They'll betray us the moment it's convenient." Jones stepped forward. "We've all lost too much already. This war needs to end." The room fell silent. Then, slowly, heads began to nod. As the days stretched into weeks, the alliance grew stronger. But time was running out. Long-range sensors detected a massive triumvirate fleet assembling, preparing to crush the rebellion. Jones pored over star charts with Jackson, planning their next move. "We can't just sit here and wait for them to find us," he said. Jackson's eyes glittered. "What do you propose?" Jones outlined his plan for covert strikes. Jackson listened, his expression unreadable. "It's risky," Jackson said finally, "but it may be our only choice." They assembled their strike teams, an unprecedented mix of human and Kobali operatives. As they prepared to depart on their missions, Jones addressed the gathered forces. "What we do here will decide the fate of both our peoples," he said. "Good luck and Godspeed." The strike teams vanished into the nebula, each carrying the hopes of two civilizations. As Jones watched them go, he knew the real battle was just beginning. The stealth frigate sliced through the nebula's swirling gases, its engines humming with pent-up energy. Inside, Captain Jones paced the cramped bridge, his face etched with lines of fatigue and persistence. "Sir, the assault teams are in position," Lieutenant Zhang reported, her fingers dancing across the tactical display. Jones nodded, his eyes fixed on the holographic representation of their target, The remote Zaran supply depot. Give the go-ahead. It's time to hit the triumvirate where it hurts. Across Kobali space, carefully orchestrated chaos erupted. On Zaran, a stolen triumvirate shuttlecraft touched down in the depot's landing bay. The ramp lowered, and a mixed team of human and Kobali commandos poured out, their weapons already blazing. Private First Class Rodriguez ducked behind a stack of crates as plasma bolts sizzled overhead. He popped up, his rifle spitting death at the surprised Kobali defenders. Beside him, a rebel Kobali named Shen unleashed a barrage from his heavy repeater, cutting down a trio of guards rushing to man a defensive position. "Move! Move!" Sergeant Hawthorne bellowed, leading the charge deeper into the facility. The commandos fought their way through twisting corridors, leaving a trail of stunned and bleeding Kobali in their wake. In the central munitions storage area, Corporal Chen planted shaped charges on towering stacks of plasma warheads and energy cells. "Charges set!" Chen shouted over the din of battle. 2 minutes to detonation! As the raiders fell back to their stolen shuttle, the depot erupted in a chain of earth-shattering explosions. The commandos blasted off, leaving behind a smoking crater where the triumvirate's vital supply hub had once stood. Meanwhile, on the Kobali homeworld, a different kind of assault unfolded. In a nondescript building housing the planet's primary communications hub, a team of human hackers and Kobali technicians worked feverishly to override the triumvirate's ironclad control of information. "We're in!" exclaimed Sarah Weiss, her fingers flying across an alien keyboard. "Uploading Jackson's message now." Across millions of Kobali view screens, the familiar face of their former leader appeared. Jackson's scales gleamed as he spoke, his voice resonating with passion and conviction. "My fellow Kobali," Jackson intoned, "too long have we suffered under the tyranny of the triumvirate. Their lust for power and conquest threatens to destroy everything we hold dear. I call upon all true Kobali to cast off the chains of oppression and join us in our fight for freedom." As Jackson's words echoed across the Empire, Captain Jones led the most audacious mission yet. His stealth shuttle screamed through the atmosphere of Craxus's fortress world, anti-aircraft fire exploding around them in lethal blooms. 30 seconds to touchdown!" the pilot shouted as the craft shuddered under the barrage. Jones checked his weapon one last time, his mind focused. The shuttle slammed onto the landing pad, and Jones's strike team burst out into a storm of enemy fire. They fought their way through the fortified bunker, Jones and his Kobali allies moving with deadly precision. Plasma bolts seared the air, and the acrid stench of ozone filled Jones's nostrils as they pushed deeper into the heart of Craxus's sanctum. In the inner chamber, Jones came face to face with the Triumvir himself. Craxus towered over him, all rippling muscle and razor-sharp claws. "You dare invade my sanctuary!" Craxus roared, lunging at Jones with inhuman speed. Jones barely managed to dodge the first swipe, feeling the wind of the Kobali's claws as they passed inches from his face. He struck back, landing a solid blow to Craxus's midsection, but the alien barely seemed to notice. They grappled furiously, Jones's combat training pitted against Craxus's raw strength and ferocity. Blood, both red and green, spattered the chamber's floor as they traded blows. Finally, with a desperate lunge, Jones managed to press his stun baton against Craxus's neck. The Triumvir convulsed, his eyes rolling back in his head as he collapsed. Panting heavily, Jones hefted the unconscious Kobali over his shoulder. "Package secured," he gasped into his comm. "Let's get the hell out of here." As they fought their way back to the extraction point, Jones felt a searing pain in his side where one of Craxus's blows had connected. He gritted his teeth, pushing through the agony as they made their escape. Back aboard the stealth frigate, Jones watched as Admiral Hawkins delivered humanity's ultimatum to the remaining Triumvirs. The Kobali leaders' faces contorted with rage, but in the end, they had no choice but to agree to a ceasefire. Hours later, Jones found himself seated across from Jackson and the Triumvirate representatives, the weight of two civilizations' futures pressing down on his shoulders. The negotiations began, each side jockeying for position in the new galactic order. "We require a buffer zone," Jones insisted, his voice hoarse from exhaustion. A defensive perimeter to ensure Earth's safety. Jackson leaned forward, his reptilian eyes narrowing. And what of my people? We cannot simply cede vast swathes of our territory. As the arguments intensified, Craxus spoke up from where he sat, heavily guarded. You humans are fools if you think you can dictate terms to us, he sneered. Push us too far, and even Jackson's supporters will turn against you. Jones met Craxus's gaze, unflinching. Then we'd better find a solution that works for everyone, he said, because the alternative is unthinkable. The negotiations dragged on, neither side willing to give ground. As the hours ticked by, the fragile peace they had fought so hard to achieve hung by a thread. Captain Jones stood at the viewport of the stealth frigate, his eyes fixed on the swirling gases of the Vega Nebula. The negotiations had dragged on for days, and with each passing hour, his frustration grew. This isn't working, he muttered, turning to face Lieutenant Zhang. We need to change tactics. Zhang nodded, her expression wary. What do you have in mind, sir? Jones strode to the communications console, his fingers flying over the keys. I'm contacting Admiral Hawkins. It's time we showed the Kobali what real power looks like. Within days, the quiet of the Vega system was shattered. Human warships materialized from stealth, their sleek hulls overflowing with weaponry. They took up positions around the nebula, a clear show of force that sent shock waves through both human and Kobali ranks. Jackson burst into Jones's quarters, his scales flushed with anger. What have you done? He hissed, tail lashing behind him. Jones met the Kobali leader's gaze unflinchingly. What needed to be done? Your moderate approach was getting us nowhere. You've undermined everything we've worked for, Jackson snarled, slamming his clawed hand on the desk. The Kobali will never trust humans now. Trust? Jones scoffed. We don't need their trust, we need their fear. As they argued, alarms blared throughout the ship. On the main view screen, a massive Kobali fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel, led by Triumvir Mordak's flagship. Mordak's face appeared on the screen, his reptilian features twisted with rage. Humans, he spat. Your treachery knows no bounds. We will crush your pathetic resistance and wipe your vermin species from the galaxy. For days, the two fleets faced each other across the void, weapons primed and shields raised. The tension aboard the human ships was palpable. Crew members moved with nervous energy, every sound amplified in the deathly quiet of space. Jones paced the bridge, dark circles under his eyes from lack of sleep. Hold position, he ordered, his voice hoarse. We can't blink first. Just when it seemed the standoff would erupt into all-out war, Mordak's voice crackled over the comms once more. His words stunned both sides. The Triumvirate hereby withdraws from the Vega demilitarized zone, he declared, his tone dripping with barely contained fury. We cede control of the shipyards and resources to Jackson's government. But make no mistake, humans, this is not over. The Kobali people will resist your occupation with every fiber of our being. As Mordak's fleet retreated, Jones turned to Jackson with a triumphant gleam in his eye. You see, this is how you deal with the Triumvirate. Jackson's shoulders sagged. You've won the battle, Jones, but at what cost to lasting peace? Ignoring the Kobali leader's concerns, Jones issued rapid-fire orders to fortify the newly acquired shipyards. We need to start producing warships immediately, he insisted. Expand our defensive perimeter, establish buffer colonies. Jackson complied, but his movements were stiff, his eyes distant. When Jones wasn't looking, the Kobali leader slipped away, sending encrypted messages to the few moderate factions he still trusted. Meanwhile, Admiral Hawkins wasted no time in capitalizing on their victory. Human colony ships pushed deep into former Kobali space, establishing heavily fortified outposts on resource-rich worlds. As Jones watched the expansion unfold on the strategic display, he allowed himself a small smile. This is how we secure humanity's future, he murmured. But in the shadows of the captured Kobali shipyards, Jackson's eyes narrowed. The uneasy alliance between humans and Kobali teetered on a knife's edge, with the fate of both species hanging in the balance. The cavernous shipyard echoed with the clanging of metal and hum of energy fields as newly constructed human warships rolled off the assembly lines. Captain Jones strode through the facility, his boots clanking on the metal walkways. He paused to admire a sleek destroyer, its hull filled with weapon ports. "Impressive, isn't it?" Jones said, turning to Jackson, who trudged beside him. "At this rate, we'll have a fleet large enough to secure the entire sector within months." Jackson's scales rippled with agitation. "This is madness, Jones. You're turning Vega into a powder keg." Jones ignored the protest, tapping commands into his datapad. "I want production increased by another 15%. We need those defense platforms operational yesterday." As Jones pushed for rapid militarization, Triumvir Mordak huddled with other Kobali faction leaders in a secret bunker deep beneath the surface of Cronus Prime. The air hung heavy with tension as Mordak's clawed hand swept over a holographic star map. "Look at the human buildup," Mordak hissed. "Jackson has become nothing more than their puppet, allowing them to encircle us. If we don't act now, the Kobali people will be disarmed and subjugated." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembled leaders. One of them, his scales a mottled green, leaned forward. "What do you propose, Triumvir?" Mordak's eyes gleamed. "We must unite. Only together can we drive these human invaders from our space." Weeks passed, and human prospecting fleets pushed deeper into Kobali territory. On the bridge of the UNSS Dauntless, Admiral Hawkins watched as a convoy of heavily armed ships escorted mining vessels towards a resource-rich world. "Sir," a young ensign called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the planet's surface. It's Jackson." Jackson's face appeared on the console, his expression taut with anger. "Admiral, you must halt this incursion immediately. You're violating our sovereignty and pushing us to the brink of war." Hawkins leaned back in his chair, unmoved. "We're simply securing vital resources, Jackson. Surely you understand the necessity." "Necessity?" Jackson sputtered. "You're uniting moderates and hardliners against us. If this continues, we'll face a mass uprising." The Admiral's eyes hardened. "Then we'll meet it with overwhelming force. It's the only language they seem to understand." The situation reached a critical point in the Kalara system. A human colonial fleet dropped out of FTL, their ships forming up around the small Kobali outpost world. On the planet's surface, Governor Tharkin rallied his meager defense forces. "We will not bow to these invaders," Tharkin declared, his voice carrying across the assembled troops. "Kalara is Kobali, now and always." As the human ships entered orbit, Tharkin gave the order, "Open fire." The skies above Kalara lit up with plasma bolts and energy beams. Human dropships exploded in midair, while Kobali defense towers crumbled under the onslaught. For hours, the battle raged, until the furious human colonists unleashed their full might. From orbit, massive energy weapons rained down hellfire upon Kalara's surface. Cities vanished in blinding flashes. Military bases were reduced to glowing craters. When the bombardment finally ceased, Kalara was a shattered, irradiated husk. News of Kalara's destruction spread like wildfire through Kobali space. On a dozen worlds, protests erupted as enraged citizens took to the streets. Even some of Jackson's staunchest supporters now turned against the human alliance. In his quarters aboard the human command ship, Jackson paced restlessly. His tail lashed back and forth as he dictated a message to Captain Jones. "This has gone too far," Jackson said, his voice quavering with barely contained fury. "Either you agree to return to the original ceasefire boundaries and withdraw from occupied Kobali worlds, or I will resign my position. I will have no further part in this madness." Jones received the ultimatum with a sneer. He keyed his comm unit. "Security, place Jackson under house arrest and prep a shuttle. We need to install our new Kobali puppet immediately." As Jackson was led away in restraints, Jones turned his attention to the strategic display. A sea of red icons represented human fleets surging towards the Kobali frontier. Jones allowed himself a cold smile. The real subjugation was only beginning. Jones stood before the viewport, his hands clasped behind his back as he watched Jackson being escorted onto a shuttle. The Kobali leader's scales were dull, his head bowed in defeat. As the shuttle's engines flared to life, Jones turned to face his newly appointed puppet, a Kobali named Zyrax. "You understand your role?" Jones asked, his voice cold and measured. Zyrax nodded, his eyes darting nervously. "I do, sir. I will ensure the smooth transition of power and facilitate human expansion into Kobali space." Jones nodded curtly and dismissed Zyrax with a wave of his hand. As the door slid shut behind the puppet leader, Jones allowed himself a small smile. Everything was falling into place. But the triumph was short-lived. Within days, reports flooded in from across Kobali space. On the colony world of Nexus Prime, human soldiers found themselves pinned down by heavy fire as they attempted to secure a spaceport. "We're surrounded," Private Rodriguez shouted into his comm, plasma bolts sizzling past his head. "They came out of nowhere." Similar scenes played out on a dozen worlds. Human settlers huddled in makeshift bunkers as Kobali insurgents rained down hellfire on their positions. Supply depots erupted in flames, and communication relays toppled to the ground in twisted heaps of metal. Jones paced the command deck of his flagship, his face a mask of barely contained fury. "How did this happen?" he snarled at his assembled officers. "Where did they get these weapons?" Before anyone could respond, alarms blared throughout the ship. On the main view screen, a sea of red dots appeared, representing Kobali ships converging on human positions. "Sir," a young lieutenant called out, her voice trembling, "we're receiving reports of mass uprisings on Kalara, Tauros 3, and Vega Prime. Our forces are overwhelmed." Jones banged his hand on the console. "Declare martial law across all occupied territories," he barked. "I want every available ship redeployed to crush this insurgency. Use whatever force necessary." The next hours were a blur of frantic activity. Jones watched grimly as human warships unleashed their fury on Kobali cities harboring resistance fighters. Buildings crumbled under the onslaught, and fires raged unchecked through densely populated areas. On the planet Tauros III, Major Chen led a squad of Marines through the smoking ruins of what had once been a thriving metropolis. The stench of burning flesh filled the air as they moved from building to building, rooting out pockets of resistance. "Clear!" Chen called out as they swept through another abandoned home. But as they emerged onto the street, a hidden Kobali sniper opened fire. 2 Marines fell before Chen could dive for cover. "This is insanity," Chen muttered, his hands shaking as he reloaded his weapon. "We're supposed to be peacekeepers, not butchers." Back on the flagship, Jones received a priority transmission from Admiral Hawkins. The older man's face was grave as he appeared on the screen. "Captain, this has gone too far," Hawkins said, his voice heavy with concern. "The casualty reports coming in. It's a bloodbath out there. We're losing support back home, and there's talk of other powers intervening if we don't de-escalate." Jones leaned in close to the screen, his eyes blazing. "We can't back down now, Admiral. If we show weakness, everything we've fought for will be lost." As they argued, another alert sounded. Jones turned to see footage of the ring shipyards in the Vega system erupting in a series of massive explosions. Kobali ships darted through the debris field, ramming into key structures and detonating in blinding flashes of light. "No!" Jones roared, watching helplessly as his prized shipyards disintegrated before his eyes. And then, to his horror, he saw familiar Kobali fighters turning on their former allies, strafing human ships with deadly precision before vanishing into the chaos. As the full scope of the disaster became clear, Jones sank into his command chair, his pupils dilating. How had it come to this? His plan to crush the Kobali once and for all had backfired spectacularly, igniting a firestorm of resistance that now threatened to consume everything. A junior officer approached cautiously, a datapad clutched in his trembling hands. "Sir," he said hesitantly, "we've intercepted transmissions indicating that Mordak has freed Kraxus. They're They're using evidence of our actions to recruit more Kobali to their cause. Jones stared at the strategic display, watching as more and more sectors turned red, indicating areas lost to Kobali control. His forces were stretched to the breaking point, and now he faced an impossible choice. Double down on the brutal tactics that had led them to this point, or retreat and abandon everything they had gained. As alarms continued to blare and reports of fresh atrocities poured in, Jones realized that no matter what he decided, the consequences would be catastrophic. The true cost of his hubris was only just beginning to reveal itself.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.